Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a deep look into Puro Tango Blast.
That's right. We've got this document, purotangoblast.pdf, which is pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, it seems packed. And we're going to use it to try and unpack this whole phenomenon and figure out what it really is. It seems complex.
It definitely is. And that's our goal here, really, to distill what Puro Tango Blast is all about, its history, its structure, or maybe lack of structure.
And clear up some misconceptions, maybe.
Yeah.
Highlight what makes it different.
Exactly. We want to give you, the listener, a clearer picture of this, well, significant aspect of the Texas game scene.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Puro Tango Blast. Our source calls it a collective term. What does that actually mean on the ground?
It means it's not one single gang, basically. It's more of an umbrella covering a whole network of different gangs.
Okay, different gangs, but with something in common.
Yeah, the key things are they're mostly Hispanic guys, they're regionally based, and they hail from the big Texas cities. Think Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin. Those are the main hubs.
So not like a nationwide thing with one bras, but more like alliances of local crews.
That's a good way to put it. These local groups are called tangos. So you've got the Houston Tango, the Dallas Tango, and so on.
Right. And the document mentions specific names for these tangos.
It does. For Houston, you hear Houston or H-Town. Dallas is D-Town. Fort Worth gets called Foritos, F-Town, or sometimes Foros.
Okay.
And Austin is ATX, A-Town, or sometimes La Capirucha.
La Capirucha, what's that?
It's Spanish kind of slang for the capital. Fits Austin, right?
Ah, makes sense. Now, the name Tango Blast itself,
Yeah.
it sounds pretty intense. Does the document explain that part? Is it like a special unit?
Well, that's one of the interesting bits. It seems Tango Blast isn't actually a separate group.
Oh,
Yeah, according to some members mentioned in the source, it's more a term for a tango member who's just more active criminally, more involved in, the blast.
so it describes a level of activity, not a different organization.
Seems like it. It's about how involved someone is within their local tango, not that they've joined some elite blast squad.
That's a really subtle but important distinction. Okay, what about the name Tango then? Where did that even come from? It doesn't sound like a typical gang name.
The source gives a couple of ideas. One is that it originally just meant like hometown clique, which fits with that regional focus,
Yeah, that makes sense. Simple.
But then there's another claim some members make that it's actually an acronym.
An acronym for what?
Together Against Negative Gang Organizations.
Really? Huh. That's quite a statement. A bit ironic, maybe.
Well, yeah.
Mm.
But it shows perhaps an initial intention or at least a narrative they wanted to project, possibly related to why they formed in the first place.
Right. Let's get into that. The origins. When did this all start and why?
Okay, so the document points mainly to the late 1980s, and the birthplace wasn't the streets initially. It was inside the Texas prison system, the TDCJ.
Inside prison. So they formed there first.
That's what the evidence suggests. Hispanic inmates from these different major cities started banding together.
Why? What was the trigger?
Protection, mostly. Self-preservation. They were up against older, very established, and often predatory prison gangs, STGs, security threat groups.
Like who?
Groups like Mexicanemi, also known as the Mexican Mafia of Texas, and the Texas Syndicate. These were powerful, organized groups already running things inside.
So the tangos formed to defend themselves against these bigger players.
Exactly. Safety in numbers. Though the source does mention there might be roots going back even further, maybe into the 70s. It could have been a gradual thing.
Interesting. Now, structure. When you think gang, you usually imagine like bosses, lieutenants, rules. Is that Tango Blast?
That's where it gets really different, and this is key. Compared to those traditional prison gangs like Mexicanemi or Texas Syndicate, Tango Blast is, well, it lacks that strict hierarchy.
Lacks it. How so?
The Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS, actually classifies them as a loose affiliation gang.
Loose affiliation. Okay. What does that look like in practice? No big boss calling the shots statewide.
Pretty much. For example, law enforcement in El Paso County noted there's basically no known formal tango organization on the streets there.
And inside prison. Is there any leadership?
There can be, sort of on a very local level. Like within one specific cell block or area of a prison, tango members might elect someone called a sila.
Sia. Like
Chair. Yeah, Spanish for chair. Basically a spokesperson for that specific group in that specific place.
Yeah.
But it's not like a chain of command. That Scylla doesn't boss around tangos in another prison or even another part of the same prison necessarily.
So very localized leadership, if you can even call it that.
Right, and crucially, the document emphasizes there's no constitution, no written rules that all tangos have to follow.
Wow, no constitution. That's wild for a group this size.
It really is. It underlines that decentralized, almost fragmented nature. It's fundamental to understanding them.
Does that looseness extend to, like, membership duties? Do members have obligations?
That's another big difference. According to the source, nope. No obligation to follow orders from anyone higher up, because there isn't really anyone higher up in that formal sense.
No mandatory meetings, no dues.
Apparently not. And this is a huge point. Members aren't required to stay active in gang stuff once they're out of prison.
Seriously.
Mm.
That's completely different from most gangs, isn't it? Where it's like blood in, blood out.
Massively different. It suggests the affiliation might be more situational for some, tied strongly to the prison environment where it often starts.
Okay, so how do you even become a member then? Is there an initiation?
It's not standardized. There's no single way. Each tango group kind of decides for itself who gets in and how.
So it could vary from city to city or even prison to prison.
Exactly. The document mentions one method that's been reported, basically. A recruit has to fight 2 or more members and prove they won't give up, stand their ground.
Sounds tough.
Yeah.
But it's not the only way.
Doesn't seem like it. The main takeaway is inconsistency. And importantly, membership is usually gained in prison, not typically in county jail or out on the street.
Which reinforces those prison origins again. Okay. Let's talk about those regional variations, the tangos. You mentioned the Four Horsemen earlier.
Right. That's a term for the originals.
Yeah.
The first 4 big tangos that formed.
Oh.
Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston. The foundational groups.
And each tango has its own identity markers, right? Like tattoos.
Definitely. That's a big part of it. Members often use symbols tied to their specific city or region. Sports logos are huge. Area codes too. Things that scream hometown.
Can you give some examples? What tattoos would we see?
Sure. For Houston or H-Town, you might see the Houston Texans logo, maybe the Astros star, or this specific cracked Texan star symbol.
Okay.
D-Town guys from Dallas, often the Cowboy star. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very Dallas. What about Fort Worth?
Foritos or F-Town, you see the 8 Sunday area code a lot. Sometimes it's worked into a star shape, which the source notes can look a bit like a pentagram.
Huh. And Austin. La Cabarucha.
They might use the Texas Capitol building image. Very literal.
These are really specific markers, very tied to place. Are there other tangos beside those first 4?
Oh yeah, lots. The network spread. The document lists West Texas Tango Puro West, or WESOS. They use 806 or 432 area codes, or WT.
Okay.
Then there's the Rio Grande Valley group called Velucos. San Antonio has the Orejones.
Orejones, what do they use?
Spurs logos, naturally.
Okay.
Also the Alamo and the 210 area code, very San Antonio specific.
And others.
Corpus Christi has the Corpitos, and El Paso has the Cucos, or EPT. It shows how widespread it became across Texas.
It really paints a picture of this sprawling yet locally focused network.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're classified as a gang. What kind of criminal activities are linked to them?
The source lists a pretty wide range, unfortunately. Things like prostitution rings, robberies, definitely drug trafficking, aggravated assaults.
Standard gang stuff, sadly.
Yeah, and also things like flight to avoid prosecution, car theft, unlawful use of vehicles, it says, and illegal gun possession. A broad spectrum.
And rivalries. Who are they typically up against?
Well, clashes happen with those established prison groups we mentioned, like Mexicanemi and Texas Syndicate. Also, Barrio Azteca, which is strong out west, and even conflicts reported with Crip sets sometimes.
So plenty of conflict potential, both inside and outside.
Definitely. These rivalries are a major source of violence.
We talked about how widespread they are. Do we have any idea of the numbers? How many members are we talking about?
The estimates in the document are pretty large, somewhere between 17,000 and 19,000 members.
Wow. 17 to 19,000. And yet they're still called a loose affiliation.
It's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it, how something that big lacks that central control. It really underscores how different their model is.
It really does. Has this group gotten much media attention, like documentaries or anything?
Yeah, the source mentions one specific instance. The History Channel show Gangland did an episode on them. Season 5, episode 12, apparently.
Okay, good to know for anyone wanting a visual dive. So let's try and wrap this up. What are the big takeaways from this deep dive into Puro Tango Blast?
I think the main thing is that it's not your typical pyramid-structured gang. It's a large, network, really, a
Mhm.
collection of regional Hispanic gangs born out of the Texas prison system, primarily for protection.
And that decentralized nature, that loose affiliation, is probably the defining characteristic. No central boss, no constitution, varying initiation, even membership obligations seem fluid.
Exactly. The identity comes from the region, the tango, and that shared prison experience, but not from adherence to some rigid overarching structure like Mexican ME or the Syndicate. It's a fascinating contrast.
It really is.
Yeah.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on.
Mm.
Given this very decentralized, fluid structure and how deeply rooted these tangos are in specific Texas communities, how does that reality change things for law enforcement? Is it harder or easier to tackle compared to a gang with a clear leader you can target?
That's a great question. And what does it mean societally when you have a gang identity that someone might potentially adopt more strongly inside prison and less so outside, or that's so tied to geography? What are the implications of that kind of fluidity?
Definitely some complex questions with no easy answers, something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.